done a baseball interview before.
Well, Mr. Burns had done it. The power plant had won it.
You must be interested in how the Tigers are going to do, right?
Not really, because I'm not a Tigers fan. Thank you, though, jerk, for still busting my chops a year later about, hey, that was a good pick last year. It just didn't pan out.
I grew up in a minor league baseball family. There's always something moralistically to find that's unfortunate about baseball. And yet the game really does happen between the lines.
It's against my nature to root for the Dodgers in any shape or form, because I hate them and all they stand for.
I get this fatalism where you get to this point where you protect your emotions by saying, well, nothing's going to happen anyway. So that you're surprised and delighted when something does happen and it turns out great.
Winner, of course, will get bragging rights. So are you ready for predictions?
Yeah, I'll do my best.
All right, that's all we ask.
I'm going to be afraid to hear this in October.
You watch. One of these teams is going to come out of there and we'll go, oh man, that Go Rightly is a genius.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, Binnall of America Audio with your host, Tim Binnall.
Hello there, my friends. This is Tim Binnall of BinnallofAmerica.com with the second annual BOA Audio Baseball Special. It is March 30th, 2008. We had such a good time last year with the baseball special that we wanted to do it again this year and do it bigger and better than we did the year before. We're bringing back esoteric filmmaker and pundit extraordinaire Paul Kimball, the crackpot historian himself, Adam Go Rightly, and one half of the UFO Mystics and author of Project Beta, the esteemed Greg Bishop. Plus, we're bringing in two new players for the Festivus. They are, of course, Lauren Coleman, the living legend of cryptozoology, and Richard Dolan, the ultra-popular ufologist, both also huge baseball fans. And that's what this episode is all about, my friends, baseball. There's not going to be much esoterica except maybe at the beginning and the end of each interview, what have you been up to and what's coming up next. Those bookend the interviews, but other than that, it's pure baseball talk on just so much different stuff. I couldn't even list it right now. The episode's long enough as it is. You can read the preview on the audio page at BOA. If you're not a big baseball fan, I apologize. Chances are you're not even listening to this. But we'll be back next week with, of course, more off-kilter esoteric discussion. And again, even though they're probably not even listening to the show, the folks who may be outraged that we're doing a baseball special, is a overarching point to this episode, and that is really that there's life outside of esoterica. We hope you'll join us and enjoy our conversations about America's pastime. No bios for these folks. I'd be here all day reading the bios for all 5 guests, but you can find their bios via BOA, of course. They've been on the program already numerous times. So without any further ado, let's play ball. These interviews were recorded over the course of the last couple weeks at various dates and times. Big thanks ahead of time to all the great guests who were more than accommodating as far as setting up these little shortcut interviews. To round up all 5 folks was a bit of a challenge, but thanks to them being so available, we managed to get it together here for the show. And now, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, the second annual BOA Audio Baseball Special.
You're listening to Binnall of America Audio.
After a record-breaking 3 appearances last year, our guest here has finally made his return to the program just in time for the second annual BOA Audio Baseball Special. He was kind enough to welcome me up to Canada over the summer, so I think this might be one of the few guests I've met in person, and I consider him a good friend of mine. And he's one of the leading voices in the world of esoterica. He really is a fine esoteric pundit. His opinions usually are scathing and also very thought-provoking. But chances are we're not going to get into that because we're going to be talking about baseball tonight here for the second annual baseball special. Paul Kimball, welcome back to the program.
Thanks a lot, Frank. Oh, sorry, Tim Binnall, my good friend Tim Binnall, of course, right? How could I forget? Yeah.
Oh,
Frank.
What a way to start.
Yeah, busting your chops already. Good to be back on
Kimball of Canada. Sorry, that was last year. Binnall of America. Yeah, especially talking about baseball, which is frankly far more important than anything in the paranormal world.
Yeah, that seems to be the case lately.
Yeah.
Well, I guess before we dive into the baseball, let's do just a little, what have you been up to in the last year since we talked to you, so people can, familiarize yourselves with what you've been up to, because they haven't heard from you in a while.
Sure. Last time I would have spoke was just on the radio with you. Would have been when we had just finished Best Evidence. It was the big Best Evidence special that aired. It was critically acclaimed, I'm happy to say, and I just got back from the United States where it picked up an EBE award for Best Historical Documentary. And it worked out really well. I finished in the interim a documentary on classical music for Bravo up here in Canada. And I spent a fair amount of time down in the U.S., particularly in Los Angeles, setting up 2008 and 2009, what's going to be coming. And the things you can look for are more UFO-related documentaries from Red Star, and at least one feature film and possibly two. So we're moving into the dramatic area of film and television production.
Awesome. Sounds great. Yeah, we had Greg Bishop on the show in January. He was talking about you coming down there to L.A., so sounds like it's going to be an exciting time for Red Star. Yeah,
and getting to hang out and work with Greg, who is partnering up with us in Los Angeles, it's been a real pleasure. And there is not a nicer guy in the sort of paranormal universe that I've met than Greg Bishop. So that alone makes it worthwhile. But the fact that we'll actually have business and work, and we'll get to work together, hopefully, and get to work with you and Nick and maybe Mac Tonys as well on that talk show that I wanted to do, which is still in development, but I have every confidence that that's going to go in 2008 as well. More
Awesome.
News on that probably in a couple months.
Nice. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Now, last year we sort of tried to tie in the paranormal to baseball, but we've kind of beaten that horse, so we're just going to talk baseball this year.
Yeah, I got nothing for you, paranormal and baseball. I got nothing.
Yeah, we ran the well dry, as it is last year with that angle. So, and as luck would have it, we had the first ever baseball special, and then lo and behold, the Red Sox win the World Series. So let's hope that this year the luck will keep going.
Excellent.
And when we were setting up the interview, it sounded like you were really chomping at the bit to talk a little bit about the Mitchell report and this whole Clemens thing that happened, of course, in December. Roger Clemens being named in the Mitchell report, and the hearings and all of the crazy saga that's been going on here in the wintertime. So let's hear your opinion of Clemens and the Mitchell report and this latest round of steroid scandals in baseball.
Well, to me, in particular, the Clemens thing is not hurtful, just disappointing, because I grew up, and I'm even older than you are. Clemens was not one of my heroes. I mean, I have different heroes, but in terms of players, he was one of my favorite players. The guy is a bona fide Hall of Famer. He's one of the great pitchers of all time. And when I was younger, he was just coming up with the Red Sox, and I sort of maybe turned away from him when he went to Toronto and New York. But I remember him as this ace for Boston back in the 80s. So to hear his name linked to steroid abuse was terribly disappointing if you're a fan of Roger Clemens and the Boston Red Sox and just, good baseball in general. But so he's one of the big names. Barry Bonds is obviously another one of the big names, but there's a host of, like, Chuck Knobloch's name was in there. I don't recall Chuck Knobloch ever being a massive power hitting home run guy. He's a pretty good second baseman. But you realize that these guys were taking steroids. They, by and large, weren't taking, and steroids being an overarching term to deal with any of these possible drugs or supplements that they might have been taking. Most of them legal, some of them perhaps not. But when you see guys like Knobloch taking it and some of the other sort of non-power hitters that you would see, or even pitchers, you realize they were taking them not necessarily to increase, like the whole thing, Barry Bonds couldn't have hit 70-some-odd homers unless he'd been taking steroids. No, they were taking him to stay healthy, by and large. That 162-game grind year after year after year takes a toll on your body. And what I think you're seeing is players, I don't think it's any coincidence. People have been looking at the home run stats and saying, well, this means steroids. I look at something else. Players are playing longer. There are guys in the major leagues now longer. If you look at the average span of a career, I think it would probably be longer than it would have been in the past. And I think that might have a lot to do with the fact, yes, conditioning, and they take better care of themselves, but also that they're they're using artificial means of prolonging their career, sort of taking a short-term gain and running the very real risk of long-term health problems or long-term pain. And I think that's the real correlation that you're seeing. So I think if Clemens did it, and who knows, it's still an open question, although I think he probably did. You look at his career path, you would say, well, he was a star, and then he started, there's a reason Boston dumped him. He wasn't pitching very well.
Yeah.
He was injured a fair bit, and he didn't seem to have his stuff anymore. And then all of a sudden he goes to Toronto and he wins 2 Cy Young Awards, and then he goes to New York and he continues on. And his career path looks a lot different now than, say, Dwight Gooden's, a guy he came up with and who was equally as good both when they were young. And Gooden had a good career, but then he flamed out, injuries and some other problems. And Clemens just kept pitching and pitching and pitching. And it makes me wonder, Gooden had a drug problem, but his problem wasn't steroids. He might still be pitching if his problem had been steroids. And, Clemens, if he had been doing whatever Gooden was doing, might have been out 10 or 15 years ago. So all of that said, yeah, it's disappointing to see the Rocket, who is a bit of an ass. There's no question about that personally, but in terms of being a player, a great player, would have been a great player without whatever he might have taken. And unfortunately now, I think people are always going to look at his career and put an asterisk by it, and I don't think there's anything he's ever going to be able to do about that. And Barry Bonds is the same way, and, well, Chuck Knobloch and Andy Pettitte and all those guys. But the thing is, Tim, I think you can put an asterisk next to the entire generation because we'll never know who was and who wasn't. But you can put an asterisk next to every generation. You can put an asterisk next to Babe Ruth's generation and say those guys never pitched against Negro League players. Some of the best players in the country weren't allowed to play Major League Baseball until Jackie Robinson. Garrett, Ruth, Cobb, Wagner, they never played against blacks.
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps against all, how many home runs would Lou Gehrig or Babe Ruth have hit if they'd had to face, guys like Bob Gibson, for instance, or Satchel Paige in their era? Who knows? So every era is different. Every era has its things. Our era, it's going to be steroids. But at the end of the day, to me, it doesn't undermine what they accomplished. Clemens was a great player. Bonds was a great player, regardless. I mean, you don't hit 300 like Barry Bonds did simply because you're taking steroids. You hit 300 because you're a great ball player.
Yeah. Now, what about the Hall of Fame now? Do you think chances are probably Clemens and Bonds will be on the ballot the same year because they both seemingly retired this year? What do you think the odds are for these guys going in the Hall of Fame?
Absolutely. Bonds is going to be – they might have to wait a year or two. They might get punished by sports writers who will say, look, we don't like either of these guys, and let's make a bit of an example. But there's a difference between Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens on the one hand and Mark McGwire on the other. McGwire is going to have a hard time getting in the Hall of Fame because I don't think his career stats stand up nearly as well to Bonds. I mean, Bonds stole bases. He was a reasonably good outfielder back in the day. He hit for power. He hit for average. He drew walks. He got on base. I mean, Bonds, despite the fact that he was a jerk, was a great baseball player. Mark McGwire hit home runs, and for a few years hit for a decent average. But there were a lot of years where Mark McGwire was hitting 230 and 240. If any player benefited it really from steroids, I would say it was McGwire. Clemens, the same thing. Clemens would have been a 250, 300 game winner easy, and he would have had 4 or 5 Cy Young Awards easy. He was already a Hall of Famer before he went to New York, just from his work with Toronto and Boston. So, yeah, I don't see how you can keep those guys out of the Hall of Fame. The only possible way would be if they have criminal convictions attached to them and for perjury or whatever. But here's the thing. I don't think either of them ever should have been before Congress or before anything. What business does and this gets to the Mitchell report, what business does the government have investigating Major League Baseball? As far as I can see, none. There's no reason they should be sticking their nose into this. This is baseball's problem. If baseball wants, because what these people were doing, by and large, was not illegal. Nobody was breaking any laws. They might have been breaking the rules of Major League Baseball, but even that is questionable. So I don't see why you should be hauling guys like even Rafael Palmeiro or Mark McGwire before Congress. Honestly, you've got a war in Iraq, you've got gas nearing $4 a gallon, the economy's in the shambles, and you're, spending your time sort of questioning Rafael Palmeiro and Roger Clemens about whether they use steroids? please. So if it's like Bill Clinton, yes, he lied, and so that's bad, and he should have been impeached for that. But the thing is, he never should have been asked the question in the first place because, frankly, it's nobody's business whether he got a blowjob in the White House. And as far as I'm concerned, it's not Congress's business whether or not Roger Clemens or anybody else used steroids in Major League Baseball. So even if they're convicted of something, lying to Congress, whatever, even that, I think people are going to look at and go, well, look, no, in terms of the integrity of the game, I don't see how they were any more egregious than anybody else who was playing the game at that time. They just seemed to be the guys that sort of get singled out. Joe Jackson doesn't belong in the Hall of Fame. He threw a World Series. Roger Clemens, if anything, he was trying to prolong his career so that he could help teams win World Series. And I don't think he was cheating. And so unless you can prove to me that they broke the rules of baseball, then they should be in the Hall of Fame.
All right.
There you go.
Unfortunately, you don't get a vote, though, right?
I do, though. I do get a vote, don't I? No? Oh.
No, this isn't like the All-Star game.
No. Well, McGuire's problem, though, is not going to be necessarily steroids. It's going to be the combination of steroids and the fact that his stats perhaps are just not good enough when you have that taint of steroids. Paul Merrill had the same problem. I mean, if they had hit over 650 home runs, both of them, I don't care what they did, would be in the Hall of Fame. But Bonds is a lock for the Hall of Fame at some point.
I don't know, though. Paul Merrill, he has I was under the impression he did have Hall of Fame numbers. I thought he had like 500 home runs and 3,000 hits or something like that.
Yeah. No, he's got good numbers. He's got numbers that for anybody else would probably get them in the Hall of Fame. And he might well wind up, I think he's a better bet than McGuire, frankly. But Palmeiro, there's no question that Palmeiro lied and specifically lied, and he did it in a way that he seemed offended to even be asked the question, and the hypocrites don't fare well, as Governor Spitzer is now finding out. And in particular, I think Palmeiro is the one that seems, with possible exception of Roger Clemens now, the most hypocritical. But Clemens' numbers are just so good. They're just unassailable for the Hall of Fame. And I think Barry Bonds is in that same category too. Palmeiro, he might have to wait a couple of years. He'll probably get in someday. McGuire is the one I think who's going to have the real problem. So
yeah. And before we set the interview up, you were pretty excited about Joe Torre heading out to L.A. to Bishop Country. So what are your thoughts on that? The whole transition of power in New York, the end of the Torre era, Joe Girardi, all that stuff. Let's hear your thoughts on that as a Red Sox fan.
I like Joe Girardi. He was a good player, and I think he'll be a good manager. And Joe Torre was a good player, and he was a good manager, and I think he still is. I think it's win-win for everybody. I think Torre was tired in New York. I think his time had sort of run its course. He'd done his thing there. But I still think he has stuff to give. I think what he needed was a team with a payroll, with a good core group of players that just needed a swift Tommy Lasorda-like kick in the butt. And that, the Dodgers are that team. They have a group of players that could win a World Series if everything falls right for them. So it's not talent they're lacking. What they were just lacking was somebody to sort of say, hey, and then hit them over the head with a shovel. Girardi, he's a good manager. I think he's a good guy, and, he's got a good group of players in New York, and he's got all the money that the Yankees organization can bring if he needs to fix a problem. So I think both of those teams are going to be contenders this year. I think you could see a Yankees-Dodgers World Series, which would be great for baseball. I'd love to see it. I wouldn't bet my money on that, but it's possible that either or both of those teams could wind up in the World Series. I think they're both playoff teams this year, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then who knows what happens after that. So it's good. I think it's a good move all the way around. It's good for Torre. It's good for Girardi. It's good for the Yankees. It's good for the Dodgers. And it's good for baseball because you need at least some of your marquee teams to be in the playoffs. It's good to have a Cleveland or a Kansas City or a Milwaukee, but you need a Boston, LA, or New York, or at least maybe even two or three of those to sort of balance everything out. And LA has been missing in action for far too long. I mean, I'm not a fan of the Dodgers, but I love the Dodgers, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I don't cheer for them, but I just love to see the Dodgers, the classic uniform, the history, everything they've got going. And it would be nice, no offense to the Rockies or the Diamondbacks, but I'd rather see the Dodgers in the World Series than those two Johnny-come-latelys. So hopefully things will swing in the West, in the National League, back to Dodgerville.
What about these Florida teams? Should we fold them, you think, and maybe move them somewhere else because they fucking both suck and no one even goes to the games?
Yes. Look, there shouldn't be professional hockey teams in Florida. That's a no-brainer. And there probably shouldn't be professional baseball teams in Florida, judging by how things have gone. It's just people go to Florida to go to Disneyland, maybe to catch a Dolphins game if you have to go see a professional sport. But it's just not, it doesn't seem to be a market that's conducive to Major League Baseball, and certainly not to the National Hockey League, which I know we're not talking about, but whenever I talk about Florida, somehow the fact that there's two NHL teams there, but none in Manitoba, just grates on me a little bit. So I would say, yeah, I don't, like the Devil Rays. Honestly, the only reason I go see a Devil Rays game is I could catch the Red Sox or the Yankees cheap if they were in town. And the Florida Marlins, yeah, they got 2 World Series wins. Good for them. But, that's a franchise that's going nowhere. And so no offense to the good folks of Florida, but there are other cities that I think would embrace baseball, and those teams would be better off in those cities, wherever they are. And I say that as a proud Canadian who watched the Montreal Expos, which I think was at one time a very good franchise, wither and die on the vine, and then finally get to move to Washington, where they're still a lousy team now, but at least they're a lousy team in a city that actually wants baseball. And Montreal was a city by the end that didn't want baseball anymore. And I think if you've got teams in places where it's obvious that they're being propped up to a large degree by Major League Baseball, and I don't mean in direct subsidies, but it's a complicated story, but they just don't belong there. So give, I don't know, the Florida Marlins to Vegas. I don't even know if a team would succeed in Vegas, but they seem to want a team in Vegas. Give them to Vegas. Put Tampa Bay up in Portland. Nobody will notice the difference. It's always raining. So, give them to Portland, Oregon, and see if a team can make a go there. Or put it in Vancouver, up in Canada. You might be able to get a team in Vancouver or whatever city you want to put them in. But to have them in Florida, it's just not working. And it's probably time that folks went, yeah, no.
And then the team that you were really a booster for last year on the special, the Detroit Tigers, they've actually they've made some big improvements this year in the off season. I think I'm getting a little nervous about them when the season starts. They've added Dontrell Willis and Miguel Cabrera, who's a big hitter, and also Edgar Renteria, which was an early trade that kind of has fallen by the wayside. Not many people remember that happening, but it did right around the early part of the hot stove period. You must be interested in how the Tigers are going to do, right?
Not really, because I'm not a Tigers fan. Thank you, though, jerk, for still busting my chops a year later about, hey, that was a good pick last year. It just didn't pan out. They were close. I don't even think they're going to make the playoffs this year. So
wow.
Yeah.
That's a bold prediction.
They have. Oh, yeah.
Really? You really think so?
No, it's a tough division.
I don't know, though. I mean, the only other team in the division I think is any good is really Cleveland.
Bingo. I was very impressed by Cleveland last year. I think they're going to be even better this year. So I would take Cleveland. Well, now, look, we're into prediction mode, aren't we? Yeah.
We're getting closer to predictions. Well,
seeing how I'm here, to me, it's Cleveland, Boston, and New York. One of those teams is a wild card, and I think it's probably going to be Boston. I think New York wins the division. And in the West, it's probably going to be Los Angeles, the Angels, the LA Angels of Anaheim, or whatever they call themselves. Yeah, I'd pick them. So, but I think the Indians are the team to beat in the Central. And Detroit's, they'll have a good season. They'll win 80-some-odd games, maybe 90, but I don't know if it's going to be enough. They got a shot. I just think Cleveland's is a better team. So.
Wow. What did you think of the playoffs? You must have enjoyed them, obviously, because the Red Sox won.
I watched the championship series, and then when the World Series came on, I kind of tuned out after game 2 because it was obvious what was going to happen. And I wasn't quite as interested. I think I saw the last 2 innings of the final game and went, yay! And then I went back to work.
Yeah.
Because I was working. And I, as you might recall, I had been down for a fair bit of it in the United States. I was traveling at the X conference and then my extended trip through down to LA. So some of that was going on, I think, while I was in the U.S. and I wasn't really watching TV or whatever. But the championship series, especially the American League Championship Series, I did see all of that, and that was great.
Yeah, that was really awesome. It was easily the best of the series that they had. Most of them were all sweeps anyway.
Yeah.
So it was kind of disappointing in that sense. But I was hoping the Cubbies would do a little better because that's who I picked last year, and at least they made the playoffs. So.
Yeah.
But I'm not as enthused about them this year as I was last year. So we'll see.
Really?
Yeah, I just don't know if they rectified all the problems they had. But they got that 100-year thing going, so they might have that to prop them up. And one other off-season thing I want to ask you about: what about the Johan Santana trade? Because that was pretty big news. It looked for a while like he was going to go to the Red Sox. I wasn't really kind of on the fence about that. I wasn't sure if I liked that move or not. But of course, it didn't end up that way. It ended up with the Mets. What do you think of that? Should the Red Sox have done more to get him?
Well, what more could you do? They offered him zillions of dollars. It's just the Mets offered him zillions of dollars plus one or whatever. And the Mets are one of the few teams that can spend as much, if not more, than Boston. So they did. And, Red Sox, National League, I think he's actually a better fit in the National League. I think he'll enjoy his time there. And he's probably going to win 17 to 20 games and maybe even pick up a Cy Young award. And he'd be good in anybody's rotation. But, the Red Sox, I think they'll do all right without him.
All right.
Sorry, that seems anticlimactic, doesn't it? But
no. I mean, there wasn't really. I'm sure you're glad the Yankees didn't get him, right?
Yeah. Well, because that's a bigger, that's a more obvious threat. I'd be particularly glad that the Blue Jays didn't get him. I mean, they weren't even trying, but the Blue Jays are one more quality pitcher away from bumping either New York or Boston out of the playoffs.
Absolutely.
And they do need that one quality pitcher. They got Halladay and then a bunch of guys who are okay but not great. You need a good, solid number two guy there. But they could be a wild card team this year,
Absolutely.
Literally and figuratively. And I could see them winning 93 games and Boston winning 91, and the Red Sox not making the playoffs or the Yankees not making the playoffs. So yeah, my wild card predict in the American League, which is to say the team that could actually get in and bump one of those other four out. To me, it's the Blue Jays, and they're a team that could actually go all the way, or they could win 78 games. They're kind of on that, between the third and fourth dimension in a paranormal sense kind of thing. They flit in and out, and they're very close to being a really, really good team, and they're just as close to being an okay team that doesn't do anything.
Peter Gammons is really strong on their number 3 pitcher, McGowan, I think his name is. He said he's going to be quite good, and from what I saw of him last year, he was really good. So I think another year of seasoning, he could be really strong.
The one thing, above all other things they have going for them, I would say 2 things to watch for the Jays. Roy Halladay, who I think is probably the best pitcher in the American League, especially now that Santana's over in New York, and Scott Rowland, who's looked pretty good in spring training. And if he can come back anywhere near where he used to be as a player a couple of years ago, then they've got themselves a really good guy.
Yeah, they've got a quality roster. They're definitely sort of flying under the radar right now, but they're a good pick, I think, if someone's going to pick them for anything. Now, we have your picks here for the American League. You got the Yankees for the AL East, the Indians for the Central, the Angels for the West, and the Red Sox for the wild card, possibly Toronto if something happens.
They got a shot.
Okay, now what about the National League?
Well, there's the Mets and Dodgers, and then there's everybody else, as far as I'm concerned. Whoever wins the Central and flip a coin, no shot at going to the World Series. Barring acts of God or something, I just don't think it's a very strong division. So that leaves you with the West, and I think the Dodgers, Torrey will whip those guys into shape. I think the Rockies were a one-hit wonder. Decent team, but they're not coming back. So I like the Dodgers, and how can you not like the Mets? I hate the Mets, but how can you not like them to get into the playoffs and then maybe go all the way? So I think, it's probably, if everything plays the way it should, to me, it's a Dodgers-Mets championship series, which I think would be great for baseball. And I think the Mets, this is the year that they go all the way to the World Series.
Oh, so you're picking the Mets for the National League Championship?
Yes.
And what about the American League?
I hate to say it, but I kind of like the Yankees.
Wow.
I think there could be a real Subway Series.
I told you the other day I'm getting a little nervous about them. I don't know which way to go yet. Either I'm really nervous about them or I'm kind of like not too worried about them, and it goes either way. But so far from what I've seen in the spring training and everything, they look like they're going to be a pretty good team, and Girardi might have given them that extra boost.
I think the Mets are the National League's easier. I think the Mets should come out of the NL. The Dodgers maybe have a shot, but I think the Mets are the team to beat and a clear favorite. In the American League, it's tougher. The Yankees, the Red Sox, the Angels, and the Indians, I think, any one of those four teams could make the World Series. I think the Jays have a shot. There are other teams, even the Tigers, obviously, have a shot. Even the White Sox, there are teams out there that if sort of everything kind of rolls their way, could have a really good year. Much tougher to pick the American League, but I think the Yankees, I don't know, there's just something, I think that having that new manager, and Girardi's a good guy, and they still have a good roster and a good lineup, and the Red Sox had their year last year. I don't think they're going to repeat. And something about the Angels rubs me the wrong way. So I think it's either the Yankees or the Indians. I think the Indians have a shot too. And here's my National League wildcard team. The team that could make an impact would be the Phillies.
The Phillies?
Yeah. The Phillies are a team. They're like the Blue Jays of the National League.
So would you literally pick them as your wild card? What the hell?
Yeah, actually, I'll go with the Phillies because I don't see anybody in the Central being a wild card team. And out west, Arizona, Colorado, San Diego, they're all decent teams. But, I think the Phillies, they got a shot. I think this might be their year to get in the playoffs again. And in the Central, I'll pick the Cardinals.
Okay.
Because they're going to bounce back.
All right.
They had a horrible year last year. I mean, the guy died. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong, and they still didn't play all that bad. They were in the race even for a while, sort of floating under 500, but they're in a division where floating under 500 puts you right smack dab in the middle of the race. So, I'll take the Cards in the Central to get swept by somebody in the first round of the playoffs.
More than likely. Now, I think you're severely underestimating Arizona. Dude, they have Dan Herron and Webb, both very good pitchers, and Randy Johnson as their number 3, even if he, even a lousy Randy Johnson is still pretty good.
Look, I'm just telling you, I didn't underestimate him. I said that the West is a pick-em division. I just think the Dodgers, with Torrey, he makes a difference. And I saw the Dodgers play last year, their final game, and they should have mailed it in. They're not going to the playoffs. It's the final game of the season, and it was like, why would you care? And they got down 6-1, I think, and they came back and they won. In extra innings. And it was obvious just watching them to me, these guys, there were good players on that team, and they just needed somebody. They just needed a manager to make the right decisions and have that thing that Torrey has. Very few managers have it, which the ability to lift everybody up and get them playing to their potential. And I think that's what's going to happen with the Dodgers this year. I still don't think it's enough for them to beat the Mets, but it's enough for them to beat the other guys in the National League West.
Yeah, and your overall World Series champion pick is the Mets?
The New York Mets, and God, it hurts me to say that.
Well, it's better than the Yankees.
Yeah, no, I know. No, I'm going with the Mets. I think they beat the Yankees in 5.
And what about, now let's talk a little bit here about the Red Sox, because we really haven't talked much about them. How do you think they're going to do this year? There's
the inevitable World Series sort of hangover. The thing about them going to play in Japan, I think, has hurt the team. Not in the sense that you got to fly over there, but all this controversy that's been going on.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff just isn't good. And so it kind of leaves a bitter taste, I think, as you go into the season. Those two things take a bit of the edge off, and they're 1 year older. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think they made any significant upgrades over last year. I think they're basically the same team going in. And that's a team that's 1 year older, and everything went right for them last year. I don't know if that can happen 2 years in a row in the modern era. So, they're a contender, and they will be for as long as they have all that money. I just don't think they're going to be a winner this year. Not World Series winner.
I'm a little nervous. Going in, but I think we're going to see a monster year out of Manny and Ortiz. I think they're both going to have big years.
Yeah.
Because Ortiz is he got his knee fixed, so he's going to be doing all right, and Manny's in a contract year, so.
True.
I think they're both going to be. Apparently, Manny's also become like a he's all into meditation now and everything. He's had a real weird changeover in the off season. He read the book The Secret.
Oh,
He's
God.
become an avid reader, too, apparently. So he's got that going for him.
Yeah, but you look at the roster, even if those two guys have monster years, there are other guys on the roster who played. They had their monster years last year.
Yeah, like
Mike
their
Lowell. Career years. Mike Lowell and Euclid, who's a good player, but there were a number of players. Everybody had good years last year. There were no major injuries. It all went right. And I just don't see that happening 2 years in a row. I would call it the Detroit Tigers syndrome, that, everything goes right, and then the next year, not quite everything breaks. And it's so competitive in the American League that I think you need everything to go right in order to make it through there.
Yeah, and it's a long season, so, things happen. We saw what happened a couple of years ago with Veritek. When he went down, the team went right down the drain. So, all it takes is one key injury, and things go haywire. If something happens to Beckett, there's going to be all kinds of problems. So,
well, yeah, and the same is true, say, of Toronto. Something happens to Roy Halladay. We've seen that with the Blue Jays before. That's the end of their season. And there's very few teams that can survive that kind of hit. I think the Mets are the one team that can really survive a major hit somewhere. And they could, just because of the division they're in, but also because of the sort of depth and breadth of their overall lineup. I think they can probably weather any storm better than anybody else, which is why I'm picking them for the World Series.
There you go. Yeah. All right. I think we pretty much covered all the topics here that I was thinking about discussing. So anything you want to plug or anything coming up that you want to mention that we should know about or anything like that, of course, stay tuned to the outstanding blog, Red Star. Is it Red Star Film or Films?
The Other Side Truth, www.redstarfilms, with an S, .blogspot.com. And RetroCon 3. There you go.
Yeah, you're going to be at UFO RetroCon 3. I'm seeing if I can work out something for me to get out there. I'm still on the fence about this, so I'm not sure yet. But you'll be at RetroCon 3.
Yes.
And working on your big move to LA and future exciting plans for Red Star.
Yeah, and if I don't know when you're airing this, but if it's before RetroCon, Redfern, Bishop, Kimball, maybe Binnall, Ken Thomas, Adam Gorightly. It's going to be a really good lineup at one of the 7 wonders of the UFO world, the Integratron and Giant Rock, which, if you're really into UFOs, you should try and visit at least once in your lifetime. So if you're anywhere near Southern California, April 27th and 28th, come on out. We'll be screening Best Evidence, among other things.
Awesome. Absolutely. Yeah, this will air before the RetroCon, and I definitely recommend people check it out. The lineup is awesome. We're going to have Bishop on here for the baseball special and Gorightly, so
there you go.
We'll be talking about it anyway, but definitely check it out, and hopefully I can be out there and we can throw some beers back again and raise a little hell out in the desert.
Damn straight.
Well, Paul, thank you so much for coming back on the show. It was great to have you again. Of course, we're going to have you back for paranormal discussion at some point in the future. Once things settle down a little bit for both of us. And like I said, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show, not just tonight, but 3 times last year, and for welcoming me with open arms up there in Canada over the summer, and maybe we can swing some kind of Canada trip again. I know I'll be up in Canada again this summer, so.
Oh, really?
I'm pretty sure. I'm like 90% sure. So.
Well, maybe I'll come over to PEI this time.
That would be cool. That would be cool. But, yeah, like I said, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show, and like I said, for all the great stuff. So I wish you the best, and obviously we'll be in touch. We're always in touch, so take it easy, Paul.
No problem. Thanks, Tim.
You're listening to Binnall of America Audio.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 2nd annual Binnall of America Audio Baseball Special. Our guest here is a super cool guy. I actually had the chance to meet him in October, and obviously I've interviewed him before on the show, but having a chance to meet him in person was a real thrill for me, and he exceeded my expectations, went above and beyond what I had expected. He's truly a man of the people, which is something that surprised me because he's such a high figure in his field of cryptozoology. And he appeared last year on the BOA Audio Baseball Special, but only in recap form, a little segment from his previous appearance on the show. And after I talked to him here in October, and we actually had a little baseball connection. We're watching the American League Championship Series at the Monster Mash, hiding out in the green room, trying to sneak away and watch some baseball. And he said he would definitely come back here for the baseball special this year. So we've got him here for some fresh discussion on baseball. Ladies and gentlemen, he is the man pretty much in the world of cryptozoology, and he's also a leading figure in suicide study and shooting studies and all that stuff. He is Loren Coleman. Loren, welcome back to the show. Thanks for coming back for the baseball special.
Sure, Tim. It's great to be here, and it was lots of fun trying to deal with those one or two Cleveland Indian fans as we were, rooting for the Red Sox in the green room.
There you go. Well, I guess before we sort of dive into the baseball, let's just do a little update. What have you been up to since the last time we talked to you, and how have you been in the last, since October at least? What's going on?
Oh, it's always busy. I've been, writing lots of blogs for Crypto Mundo. I actually just got back from one of my dual trips down to Florida. I did a little, what I call the Pinky expedition. Pinky is a dinosaur-like creature that was reported during the 1950s and through the 1970s, with reports back into the 19th century of a dinosaur-like creature, lake monster in the St. John's River area. So I went out almost every day in a boat or doing a little expedition, Gatorland and Dinosaurland on the side trips. But I also was down there because my son is a shortstop with a college team and a co-captain of the Brandeis University team. So they were playing the UAA tournament series, and they came out on top 5 wins to 2 losses for that whole week. And so that was lots of fun. And I happen to be the sort of the director of the boosters for the Brandeis baseball team and helped out quite a bit with the team down there.
Awesome. Sounds great. Now, what you were telling me when we met in October was that you'd seen a lot of the Sea Dog games up there, because that's right around your area, huh?
Oh, definitely. I live in Portland, Maine, and I grew up in a minor league baseball family. My grandfather was the head groundskeeper for the Decatur, Illinois Commodores, which was a minor league farm team for first the St. Louis Cardinals and then the San Francisco Giants. And my family went to almost every game, and I grew up, with my brothers in their stroller, and I was the oldest one. And then my father would help him shag balls. And so when I moved, around the country and then finally ended up in Maine, I was very delighted. I think it was about 12 years ago that the minor league team, the Sea Dogs, really started here. And that for 10 years they were a Marlins team, and then the last 2 years they've been a Red Sox AA team. So those first 10 years I had season tickets with 5 other families and would catch a lot of games. But as my boys grew older and older in high school baseball, I would go to less minor league games and more, high school games and then college games. So my time with the minor league team has kind of gone downhill with my own involvement firsthand with baseball.
Yeah. You must have seen a lot of the guys coming up then through the Sea Dogs organization that we know about today, huh?
Oh, yeah. I'm a big fan of Josh Beckett, who was a Marlin, and Renteria. A lot of those guys, early on were first with Marlins, and then because of John Henry's connection with both the Marlins, then the Red Sox, a lot of those guys you'll see are naturally kind of first Marlins, go to other places, and then, people like Brad Penny and that are kind of sprinkled around the major leagues now. But a lot of them, some way or another, seem to end up back at the Red Sox. So it's been kind of fun to watch that. And then, of course, lots of the new guys like Dust Pedroia and, Papelbon, they came through the Sea Dogs organization too.
Yeah, that's cool. I wish there was, there's some minor league teams around here, but it's still kind of a hike for me to get out to Lowell or something like that to see them. But definitely get to see a lot of the future stars there. Now, there was a lot of stuff going on here in the off season that we could dive into. What story really piqued your interest the most? I'll throw some out here, and then we'll talk about whatever one you want to. There was the Mitchell report and the Clemens saga that happened throughout January, February, and the congressional hearings and all that. Of course, the changing of power at the Yankees with Joe Torre out and Joe Girardi in.
Hank in, too.
And Hank, yes, and Big Hank.
Really taking the place of George. So, but, let's stop with the steroids. And
okay.
I think that's a really sad episode for baseball. I'm glad that, in some ways I really understand why the players didn't want to talk, because what's obvious is that, the players are going to be the ones to get blamed, and the management usually tries to get out of it, and I think that's quite obviously been part of what we've seen happen. I mean, Clemens, and whether he lied or not, and I think it is developing with the photographs that were taken of him with at some of the parties that he said he wasn't at and different things like that. We're seeing that Clemens, certainly his ego, which has been quite apparent down through the years, whether he's been with the Yankees, Blue Jays, or the Red Sox, is quite in evidence. But what I really am disappointed about is that there's always been something going on in baseball, whether it was gambling during, the Black Sox era, or whatever Babe Ruth was doing with too many hot dogs, too many prostitutes, and other things. There's always something moralistically to find that's unfortunate about baseball. And yet the game really does happen between the lines. And so to start talking about asterisks, or that this era is going to be, the record shouldn't be seen as really important, I think that's obviously going to be debated by the statisticians and different people like that. But in general, the game has been enjoyable. It's been well played, and it's been exciting. I mean, after all, it's entertainment. And just because Paris Hilton has sex tapes out there, or Britney Spears has a bad moment, doesn't mean that those aren't good entertainers in other spheres, other parts of the of the world. And we kind of forget that, I think, sometimes about baseball. Baseball is life, but it also is entertainment. It should be fun, and we really shouldn't lose kind of sight of that. My son, and I have one son who's a shortstop, and obviously I've been very pro-defense for a long time. So in many ways, what I see coming out of the steroids era is a much more attention back again to defense and kind of small ball and different things like that, which I think really has, even though the home runs get a lot of attention, and people have talked about how home runs have really brought the game back sometimes after strikes, I really think that the basics of the game are always going to be there and will always be the foundation. And I think that out of all of the steroid stuff, we're going to see the basic game being played once again, which I'm very happy about.
Yeah, and you can kind of see that in the Red Sox, because they really upped the defense in the last few years, especially.
Oh, yeah. A lot more bunting always is a good indication that, people are understanding that small ball and suicide squeezes and different things like that are important.
Absolutely. Now you mentioned Big Hank. What do you think of Hank Steinbrenner? He's become quite a colorful character here in the Red Sox-Yankees rivalry. Came out of nowhere kind of this year, but he's had a lot to say, it seems.
Well, I think that the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. The genetics are there, and I think the Steinbrenners are carrying on a tradition of, arrogance and all of that. Possibly firing people and everything. I mean, we've already seen hints of that, and I think that, poor Joe, the new Joe that's in there, Joe Girardi, has to really be watching his back very carefully for whether or not he's going to stay for very long.
Yeah.
I think that we're going to see some of the same old things from the Yankees. I think that for Yankees fans, the talent just isn't there, and they've got sort of some young people that aren't so talented and some older people on the team. So indeed, their kind of stock is going down as the Red Sox seems to be still on the increase. And that must be very hard for those Yankee people that have always wanted to be number one.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting year for them. I alternate between not too worried about them and then kind of worried about them. So I'm not really sure. I'm going to have to wait to see how the first month plays out or so.
Yeah, well, I think we always have to be worried about the Yankees. But, we might actually get some trouble from the Dodgers later on whenever we get down to the World Series. There may be some Torrey has a good game and is a good manager, and we may see some of that from the West Coast now.
Yeah, and like Paul Kimball and I were talking last night about this, and definitely got to keep an eye out for the spoiler team at Toronto. I think if they stay healthy, they're going to be a real challenge, I think, in the American League East.
Right. We just don't have to worry about the Montreal Expos anymore.
Exactly. So, what are your thoughts about the Red Sox here as the season kicks off? Not so much. I almost think of the Japanese games, even though they're official games, they still feel kind of like exhibitions to me. But what are your thoughts on the team? How they're going to shape up for 2008?
Well, I think the team looks pretty good, the Red Sox. I think what's unfortunate, and I've seen and read quite a few studies about this, that after a team goes over to Japan, it really does take a lot out of people. And the teams generally come back, and you'll notice that statistically the records kind of dip for a while. So I think that this whole business about kind of being forced to go to Japan and the whole controversy about whether or not they were going to strike due to giving their coaches and the extra pay really sets off the season on a bad foot. And so it's very exciting for the Japanese and the Japanese players and baseball in general. Baseball is a worldwide game now, so it's nice to see that part of it. But I think the physical and emotional toll that it does take out of the men themselves and in some ways their families, for them to be 18 hours in a plane, to be over there for a week, all of the differences about the culture and the food, and then to play those games, come back, and try to hit the ground running has been shown to really be a deficit. So I'm excited to watch the games over the weekend and next week and all of that, from Japan. But I think it's a bad start to the season. But the Red Sox generally can bring it around by the end, and so I think they're contenders. But of course, as we saw after 2004, they didn't bounce back for a year-to-year repeat. So I'm just very cautious about it. Hope it's there, but Josh Beckett's back problems already worry me.
Yeah.
He's not going with the team over to Japan. He's having back problems. Schilling's out. So, and who knows how long that'll really, Cologne, who was going to be a savior, is now back with the minor leagues. So we may have pitching trouble already. Some of the young guys, like Burkholz, is really good, and they may be saviors, but they're young. And, once people figure out their pitches, there's probably going to be a little dip in the middle there for them, because then they're going to have to outfox the batters. So it's kind of, the usual chess game. It's just, once again, it seems like the pitching is a vulnerable part for the Red Sox once again.
What about Daisuke? You think he's going to have a good year this year? I'm kind of predicting a pretty strong year because he's sort of hopefully gotten over that initial first year in the majors.
Yeah, I think for one thing, as a lot of people understand, his first year was supposedly, so shaky, but his first year on the Red Sox would have been a sterling year for, somebody on the Royals.
Yeah.
So I think that, for him to do better will be great. And I do think that there's this cultural adjustment that does happen with the Japanese players, and he will be better. It's just that he already was pretty good. So I'm pretty happy with him. I think that Okajima, the reliever, has already kind of been shaken a bit during spring training, so I'm hoping he settles down. He ended the year pretty stressed out and weak, I think, and so hopefully he'll stretch himself out a little bit better and have a good year. He was one of the surprises for the Red Sox last year, and I'm hoping to see some good things from him.
Yeah, I'm hoping for a monster year from both Manny and Ortiz. I'm thinking they're both probably going to be pretty strong this year.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I think one of my favorites coming up, of course, is Jacoby Ellsbury, and I think, I did see a lot of him at the Sea Dogs, and he is a fantastic player, and I hope he gets lots of time in center field. And, just the whole idea that he's the first full-blooded Binnall, which is Navajo, in the major leagues. He has a lot of cultural pride, and I think he'll be really trying to excel for many reasons. And he may be the surprise in the outfield for the whole year.
I was very impressed with him last year, so I'm looking forward to seeing more of him this year. It seems like every year there's a team that sort of is the surprise team that's really strong. A few years ago it was the Tigers. Last year it was the Brewers. Is there anyone you think that's going to sort of break out of the pack this season and kind of become a player as far as teams go?
Well, I think that, obviously because the Royals have been so bad lately, that they seem to have really tried to readjust over the winter. And, they may not be in the World Series, but I'm always happy to see teams that are at the bottom really come more to the middle.
Yeah.
So, I'm an old St. Louis Cardinals fan, and I'm always, interested how Tony La Russa is going to do once again, with all of the challenges of his team. Albert Pujols, I think, really is a guy that's waiting for a breakout year. And in the year in which we've had to hear so much about Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, it may be a guy like Albert Pujols that really pulls things out as far as having a run for home runs or things like that may direct attention away from any one team, but it may be more individuals once again that we're looking at.
And what about Bonds and Clemens? You think they're finished now? We won't be seeing them play again?
Oh, I don't think Bonds I think is going to try.
Yeah.
And so he already played under a cloud with the San Francisco Giants, so I think we may see him back, and I would predict he'd probably play for a Florida team. And so I'm really looking to him getting a few shots back down there, although I think a lot of people would be just as happy to not see him play ever again. And I think definitely Clemens is done. I just think he's a bitter man now. He feels really betrayed by Pettit and other people, and I don't see him out there on the mound again. And I think that until this is resolved for him, whether or not he's indicted or, perjury charges are brought or whatever, that may be good to really have him be in the background just for baseball.
And like you were talking about asterisks and all that stuff and sort of the cloud that's over the whole era, what do you think about the Hall of Fame chances for Clemens and Bonds? Because they're probably going to be on the ballot the same year if they both stay retired now.
Well, I think it's in the same ballpark, so to speak, to use that metaphor, as Mark McGwire. I think that Mark McGwire was an excellent player, did many good things, and you'll never see him in the Hall of Fame. Because of the testimony, because of the less than forthrightness at the end of his career. And I think that's really unfortunate. I think Barry Bonds, Clemens, Canseco,
Palmeiro.
Palmeiro, a lot of those guys, which we would expect it to be in the Hall of Fame, just won't be going. And it may be after all of us are dead that some veterans committee way in the future will vote in Clemens because they'll look at his overall record and say, well, my God, Babe Ruth had some outrageous things he did. And but there's also some other Negro League players that have been forgotten that really probably need to get in long before Clemens.
Now you're kind of you're within the realm of you're in the New England area. Do you ever get a chance to go down to Fenway much? I know you know probably as well as I do how hard it is even to get tickets in general. But do you ever get a chance to go down to Fenway and see a game?
Well, usually once a year. I didn't make any game last year because I was so involved in going to college games all around New England. I mean, there's a Salem State game, and I just travel all over New England to see my son's team. So I've kind of skipped Fenway, but oftentimes what happens is I would go to UFO conference in Seattle, and as part of my speaker's fee, they would get me a ticket to the Seattle Mariners against some other team. So I often do that. I often end up seeing major league games around the country that are kind of hooked in with my speaking engagements about cryptozoology or paranormal or 40 and phenomena. So that's been quite interesting to do.
Yeah, that's a pretty good deal. I took a trip out to San Diego last year and caught a Padres game, so I can see it's kind of fun to see some of the other teams and see what their parks are like and stuff like that.
Right. I actually, during the middle of the 70s, I went to quite a few San Francisco games, and it was horrible at Candlestick Park. I'm glad they replaced that one. It was so cold. You wouldn't expect it from San Francisco, but out there on the point, it was just freezing cold. And actually, I've been to a Padres game back in the days when it was at the old stadium that was all brown. So it's nice to see some of these new parks, and actually in Portland with Hadlock Field, which is an outstanding minor league baseball field. It's good to be able to go down there and, really kind of enjoy some old time games in a good park. And what was great, of course, for my sons is that since the field was originally the high school field and then the city took it over to make it into a minor league park, all of the baseball players that are in high school in Portland get to play in a minor league baseball field. So that's quite a privilege.
Yeah, that's cool. That sounds neat. Have you ever been to Wrigley?
Oh, yeah, I've been to Wrigley. I grew up in Illinois.
Oh, okay.
And grew up in Decatur and went to school in undergraduate school at SIU. And so I had family in the Chicago area, would go to Wrigley. I've been to the old Comiskey Field and then, of course, to the old Busch Stadium. I haven't been to either one of the new fields, either the new Busch or the new Comiskey, but those old parks were really, really quite enjoyable. I'm so happy to know that the new ownership of the Red Sox really want to keep Fenway.
Yeah.
It's sad to see places like Tiger Stadium go. I've been there too, to the old one.
Yeah, I was going to say, as far as how hard it is to get Red Sox tickets, nowadays the joke is if you want to see the Red Sox, you got to go to Baltimore.
That's quite true. I mean, I think it was maybe 10 years ago I got tickets to the Red Sox for my son and his girlfriend, and they were like, it cost me like $600 after I was done, because you have to go online and find somebody that wants to sell them, and to get good seats, they're just not that easy to get.
What about Jim Rice? Think he's going to get the call next year for the Hall of Fame, or no?
No, I don't think so. It's funny, my son did an internship at Nesson, and I actually was able to talk to Jim Rice on the phone once. I got some going away cake for them once, and he got on the phone and jokingly yelled at me for not getting them plates to go with the cake. So he's a guy with a great sense of humor, and I think he's had to really, I've seen on many local shows here in the New England area, where he's had to have a great sense of humor about not being in the Hall of Fame. And he was one of those regular sort of everyday players that, did excel once in a while, but I think that he's just, he's not been a celebrity enough to get in the Hall of Fame, and it's going to take some while.
What about Schilling's chances, you think? You think he's going to get in the Hall of Fame?
Oh, yeah, I think Schilling will definitely get in the Hall of Fame. I mean, they've got to let him in just because of the bloody sock. I mean, they let the bloody sock in, so they've got to let him in. I think the thing with Schilling is he's such a baseball guy. He doesn't want to let go, and I think at some point he's going to have to really wake up, have a conversation with his family and say, I've got to quit this year, because he's the kind of guy that I really see his record kind of slowly, eroding over the years, because he wants to stay in the game, but he's really getting worse and worse. His back, all of his different parts of his body are just not taking it. And he's not he's not an overweight kind of guy, but he's certainly not svelte. And I think that extra weight really is causing him some problems. And yet he's such a tough personality, not kind of aggressive like Clemens, but there's a toughness to Schilling that wants to make him to keep playing.
Yeah.
I think the days of coming back mid-year and getting a contract are really over, and Schilling, I don't think he'll come back mid-year, but it'll just be because his health will allow him to.
Yeah. You think this is probably his last year?
Well, I'd say, half of this year and maybe half of next year, and then I think he's going to realistically quit.
Yeah, because he was sort of just barely hanging on there last year, so, but he did pretty good in the playoffs.
Oh yeah, he does. He's a big game guy, but it's that back and forth. I mean, I think Wakefield is kind of the one that, for the Red Sox, that it'll be interesting. He just, with the kind of pitches he does, he can last a long time. Yeah,
I'm a big Wakefield fan. I'm hoping he sticks it out long enough to break the wins record for the Red Sox, because he's only about 30 wins away from that.
Yeah, Cy Young, I guess, has it right now.
Yeah, I think it's a tie between Cy Young and Clemens. I think they have like 190-something, and I think Wakefield has something like 169 or something like that.
Well, we should take some of Clemens' wins away then, right? Yeah, I think Wakefield will just hang in there and do that. He's a pretty good ball player.
All right, now it's the prediction part of the show here. We got the predictions from Kimball. We're going to try and do predictions from all the guests. So we'll go through the divisions. Pretty much, I just want to know who you think is going to win the divisions, and then the championships, and then the World Series championships. So we'll run down the list here. American League East, who do you think's got it?
Oh, I think the Red Sox will take it.
American League Central?
I think Detroit's going to surprise people.
Yeah, I think they're going to be a really good team this year with those trades. I mean, picking up Dontrell and Miguel Cabrera and Renteria. I mean, that's quite a haul. They got quite a lineup now.
Yeah. I think I think they got a pretty good bid for that.
Okay, what about the American League West?
Geez, I guess I'll have to go with the A's, just because I think they're an annual favorite.
Wow, all right. Going on a limb there. I like that.
They're a long shot, but I think I'm going to go with them.
Okay, and how about the wild card?
Wild card, I think the Yankees. Unfortunately, I have to be realistic. I think the Yankees have the ability to really be end of the year, good playoff kind of guys, and getting themselves set up for the playoffs. So I have to say the Yankees.
Yeah, especially if it comes around July or something like that, and they're out of the hunt, then I expect some big moves from them, and they don't give up easily.
If they can do things like move Chamberlain from relief to starter and stuff like that, they'll really have a good shot.
All right, now on to the National League. National League East?
National League East. Well, I guess the Mets.
All right, there's a few good teams there. There's a few teams.
Yeah, there's some good ones there.
And then what about the doghouse of the Major League Baseball, the National League Central?
Well, I'm just going to go with the personal prejudice here and say the St. Louis Cardinals.
Okay.
Just for the management.
There you go. And what about the National League West, which is really shaping up to be a tough race?
Yeah, well, I think the Dodgers. I think that Torrey's going to bring off some miracles there, and so I do think the Dodgers will bring it out.
Okay, and the wild card for the National League?
Ooh, wild card. I'm going to go against the grain here and say the Marlins.
Wow. All right. Wow. I like that.
Just a real surprise wild card.
Wow. That's good. That's a good call. I like that. And what about who you think is going to be facing off in the World Series there with National League versus American League? Who do you think the champs are going to be?
I think I'm, getting away from my favorites here and trying to I think we may see an amazing matchup between the Dodgers and the Yankees.
All right. And who do you think is going to win it all?
I think the Dodgers will win.
Wow. All right. Nice. There you go. And
I want to put the asterisk here is that I certainly hope it's the Red Sox, but I'm just trying to go with a psychic prediction.
There you go. It's in keeping with the format of the theme of the show here, so I suppose that works. And it's a long season. Anything can happen. So we saw, like I was saying to Paul last night, we saw what happened to the Red Sox when Veritek went down a couple of years ago. Everything went right down the toilet. So, that. Well,
and the Red Sox are using cash, instead of, any kind of usual backup catcher. So.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to the season. I think it's going to be fun. I feel like after the Patriots loss, I'm ready for the baseball season to start for sure. What do you have coming up for you that you want to plug or anything coming up and stuff that's going on? Of course, people can always find out more from you at cryptomundo.com and Copycat Effect blog, of course. Both awesome websites and must-read websites. You got to check those out daily, folks. I'm telling you, they're the best sites out there for news on cryptozoology and the fascinating school shootings phenomenon that you really are just amazingly on top of.
Thanks, Tim. Well, it's interesting. I'm going to be traveling quite a bit, doing a lot of different talks in Alberta, in Kentucky, in Ohio. I'll be at the Monster Mash again this year.
Mm-hmm.
So and then I'm actually just recently been talking to some people about being in Colorado in November at a gathering of ghost hunters. So I'll be branching out, and I actually trying to work right now on going over to France for the History Channel during May, so that could be quite exciting.
Oh, wow, France. That's cool. Do they have much? That's for a cryptozoology theme thing, right?
Yeah, it would be for about werewolves.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, those things sometimes actually do come through.
Yeah, exactly. And what do you think of that Monster Quest show, actually, before I let you go here? Because I'm really enjoying that. It's one of the better shows out there, I think, for paranormal stuff on TV.
Yeah, I think, Monster Quest Season 2 is starting up, and they've asked me to I helped them with Season 1 with the Cryptid Canines episode, and I'll be helping them with more of the ones in year 2. I think it's well done. It's by Doug Hajek, who did the Sasquatch Legend Meets Science documentary. So he has this kind of, including a few skeptic approaches, but also lots about physical evidence and eyewitnesses and recreations, but a little bit different than what you see on Destination Truth, which tries to be more Blair Witchy, I think, and so has a much more scientific background. But in general, the History Channel, Science Fiction Channel, Discovery, and Travel Channel are getting more and more into cryptozoology, so it's a very good time for television documentaries.
Yeah. And I was saying to somebody at the beginning of the year, we were kind of looking at the trends, and it definitely feels like cryptozoology is on the hot trend, if you will. It's definitely seemed to be picking up big time this year.
Yeah,
maybe
I think
displace
people
the ghosts.
Are burning out on the ghost and the UFO documentaries and really moving into understanding there's just as many, if not a lot more, animal stories out there. And animal stories about cryptozoology really do get the wildlife people involved, as well as the more green audience. So that's probably a lot of pluses there for cryptozoology.
Absolutely. Well, Lauren, I can't thank you enough for coming back on the show, especially for the lighthearted, off-topic sort of baseball special. I really appreciate it.
It's lots of fun. Lots of fun, Tim.
I had an amazing time meeting you last October, and like I said, folks, he's the real deal. He's a real man of the people, and I really appreciate that. Someone in his position could be a crazy egomaniac, but he's not. He's the most down-to-earth guy I've met in the field, and easily one of the coolest people I've had the chance to meet in the field. So I can't put you over enough, Lauren. I was very just starstruck at first, and then I'm like, wait a minute, Lauren's just like me. He's a baseball fan. He just wants to watch the game.
Don't talk to me during the game, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And hopefully we can have you back on the show for esoteric interview and talk about the school shootings and the cryptozoology stuff sometime in the not-too-distant future.
Sure, I'd be glad to. Thanks
Awesome.
for having me on today.
You're listening to Binnall of America Audio.